My husband, the CEO, put me on temporary leave from the very company we built together until I agreed to let him open our marriage with his mistress. I only said one sentence. All right. The next morning, he walked into the office with that smug smirk until the company lawyer ran in, face gone pale, and his smile died on the spot. I'm going to tell you about the day my husband smiled at me like I was nothing, and how that very smile was what made him lose everything he spent 8 years building. But I have to start 3 weeks earlier, in the corner office on the 57th floor, where the Seattle skyline stretched behind him like a kingdom he had just conquered, and in many ways, he really had. Grayson Martinez, CEO, Forbes Under 40, the face that once made the cover of Business Insider with the headline Architect of the Modern Supply Chain, was my husband. For 8 years, he was my husband. And for those same 8 years, I was his strategic operations director, the person who turned his messy grand visions into something that could actually run in the real world. We met in grad school. He was in the Wharton MBA program, and I was writing my master's thesis in operations management. He talked about business like he was talking about poetry, like supply chains were a symphony orchestra, and he was the conductor. I fell in love with his mind first, then his ambition, then the way he laughed at 2 a.m. over spreadsheets and cold boxes of pizza. We built Apex Forge together. Well, that's not exactly true. He built the Apex Forge brand. I built the systems that made Apex Forge work. Those are two different things, and I understood that difference very clearly from day one. Grayson was the vision. I was the execution. He was the lightning bolt. And I was the lightning rod, the thing that directed the current to the right places so it wouldn't burn the whole house down. That model worked. God, it worked so well it was terrifying. By year 5, we had 200 employees. By year 7, we went public. By year 8, we were valued at $1.2 billion. Grayson stood on a TED Talk stage talking about the future of sustainable logistics. I was proud of him. I was proud of us. I was proud of what we had built. "Close the door," he said when I walked in. "No, honey? No, thanks for coming up here. Just close the door," in the voice he used with vendors who missed deadlines. I closed the door and stood in front of his desk like an employee called in for a performance review, which honestly was probably exactly what this was. He didn't look up from his laptop for a full 30 seconds. A power move I had seen him use 100 times. Make people wait. Make them understand who controlled the pace of the conversation. I'd seen him do it to board members, investors, and once, impressively, to a senator who thought he could force him into signing a bad contract. "We need to talk about our marriage," he finally said, still not bothering to look up. Behind him, the Seattle skyline was gray. November here is always gray. Rain crawled down the glass, and the clouds hung so low the Space Needle disappeared into them like an unfinished thought. "Okay," I said. "I'm not happy," he went on. That's when he finally looked up, brown eyes meeting mine with something like pity in them. "I haven't been happy for a long time." The problem with being in an 8-year marriage with someone is that you learn their rhythm. You know when they're building sentences in their head. You know when they've rehearsed this conversation, probably in the shower or on their morning run, and definitely played it over and over again. This conversation had been practiced. "I'm listening," I said, because I honestly didn't know what else to say at that point. "I think we've grown apart," he said. "You're always stuck in operations, details, processes. I'm focused on the big picture, strategy, vision. We don't feel like husband and wife anymore. We're just colleagues." Outside, the rain hit harder. I could hear it tapping against the glass, that steady rhythm that's the default background music of every Seattle winter. "We're more than colleagues," I said quietly. "Are we really?" He leaned back in his chair, and that's when I saw it. That faint smile at the corner of his mouth, the kind of smile he always had when he was about to win a negotiation. When was the last time we had a real conversation that wasn't about resource allocation or quarterly targets? He was right, painfully right. So? What are you saying? I asked, even though part of me already knew. Part of me had known for months, maybe longer, and had carefully tucked that knowledge into a drawer in my mind, the place where people store truths that are too uncomfortable to face. I want to open our marriage. Those words hung in the air between us, clear and cold, like the glass separating us from the 57-story drop outside. Open it, I repeated, as if I'd misheard, even though I hadn't misheard at all. I've met someone, Grayson said, and that smile appeared again. Wider, more self-satisfied. Her name is Piper Aldridge, the new intern. The name landed in my ear very softly, like a thin shard of glass. Piper Aldridge, a girl who hadn't even left the classroom yet, still learning how to hold coffee at the right temperature, in the right order of priority. We talk really well, he continued, like he was explaining a potential investment. She's smart, ambitious. She reminds me of... He didn't finish the sentence, but I knew what he was going to say. Last month, he went on a business trip to Boston for 5 days. I stayed behind running the entire client project. I maneuvered a contract that saved the company nearly $10 million in shipping costs. During those 5 days, he texted me exactly twice. One message asking if I had sent the report to the board. One message asking if I had eaten dinner that night. So you're cheating? I asked. It's not cheating if I'm honest with you, he corrected. That's why I'm having this conversation. I don't want to lie. I don't want to sneak around. He went on smoothly. I want us to evolve this relationship into something more modern. A more modern arrangement. Like we were upgrading an internet plan. So in this modern arrangement, what's my part? I asked. Freedom. He answered very simply. Freedom like me? You can see other people too. No judgment, no jealousy, no need for divorce. We're both adults. You know how it affects things. I stood there, in that corner office, where we had once opened champagne the first day we rented this floor, where we had once laughed until we couldn't breathe late one night beside his executive desk, and I understood one thing very clearly. He thought I would say no. He was expecting me to say no. This entire conversation was a play. He needed me to object. He needed me to get angry. He needed me to become the stubborn one in the story he had already written. He wanted to be able to say later that he had tried, that he had been honest, that he had given me the same freedom he was taking for himself, and that I was the one who was old-fashioned, conservative, unwilling to adapt. Then he would leave with a clean conscience. He would sit at dinner with the board, with investors, with friends in expensive restaurants, and say our marriage had simply reached its expiration date, that we had changed, that this kind of thing just happens. I had watched him negotiate enough contracts to recognize the trap. I need time to think, I said. That's reasonable, he replied. And in that very brief moment, I saw surprise flicker across his eyes. He had been waiting for me to cry, waiting for me to scream, waiting for me to blow up this whole room. Take all the time you need. I turned to leave. Lauren? He called after me. I stopped with my hand on the door handle. Before, I really loved you. You know that, right? His voice softened. This isn't about feelings. It's about us being realistic about the people we've become. I nodded, but I didn't turn around. If I turned around, he'd see my face, and I wasn't ready for him to see it. Back in my office, smaller. No citywide view. No $1 million abstract art. Just 2 monitors, a decent chair, and a whiteboard covered in network diagrams and optimization algorithms. I had never cared about vision. I only cared about work. Until today. I sat down at my desk and opened the folder I had created 3 months earlier, the folder I'd always hoped I would never have to open. I had known, part of me had known 3 months ago, even before that, from the night he came home late after a board meeting his phone lighting up while he was in the shower, and I accidentally saw Piper's name with a red heart. I didn't snoop, I didn't read the message. I just glanced and filed that glance away in the same mental drawer where I stored all the things I was trying not to admit. But from that day, I started saving. The insurance folder contained 9 months of meticulously organized data. No personal messages. I never crossed that line. Just internal transactions, expense reports, invoices, transfer slips, all within the legitimate access rights of a strategic operations director. Apex Forge had grown too fast. So fast that some things started disappearing from the books. When growth happens too quickly, people like to optimize creatively. Grayson called it reasonable business expenses. Lawyers called it a gray zone. I called it what it was: embezzlement. A total of $580,000 over the past year. 5-star hotel bills labeled Strategic Client Entertainment. A business class flight for 2 labeled Market Research Travel. A Tiffany box with a $42,000 diamond necklace declared as Gift for Important Partner. All of it had Grayson Martinez approval signature, CEO. Not one big act, but hundreds of small ones. Death by 1,000 cuts. I had receipts. I had confirmation emails. I had screenshots of the approval system I had designed myself, which meant I knew exactly where things could be hidden and where they would be exposed. I had arranged them into a clear story, the kind that any IRS auditor or investigative journalist could follow in one afternoon. I had hoped I would never have to use it, until Piper, the new intern, also my husband's mistress, walked into the company. That was a scheme, not something as simple as he claimed. One email drafted, immediate resignation and internal compliance report, and the recipient was the board of directors. I paused for a second, my finger hovering over the keyboard. Once I hit send, there would be no way back. But everything had changed a long time ago. I was just the last one to admit it. I also attached a detailed report on several internal spending activities that I felt responsible for bringing to light. This report included full supporting documentation. I hoped the issues could be handled internally. However, if in the future I were contacted by tax authorities, investigative agencies, or the media, I would be obligated to provide this same set of documents due to legal duty and honesty. That was the key sentence. The sentence that would send the lawyer's blood pressure through the roof. The sentence that would make Grayson understand exactly what I had just done. Not blackmail, just a polite and professional statement. Touch me, and I have insurance. I attached a 41-page file, organized as neatly as a quarterly operations report I used to submit. Enough for any board member to immediately understand the problem. The appendix contained hundreds of invoices, emails, and Grayson's own electronic signatures on every expense. My finger hovered over the send button. Grayson thought he understood me, thought I was careful, controlled, would never make waves, would accept any arrangement he offered because I was too afraid of conflict, too passive, too practical to burn the whole world down. He had mistaken patience for weakness. He was wrong. I pressed send. The next morning, I woke up in a hotel room, looking out at a city still wet from last night's rain, and ordered a cup of coffee I didn't really need. I just needed something warm, something real, to remind myself that everything was still happening. I sat by the glass window, looking at the distant buildings like cold metal blocks, and thought about one very simple truth. With just one email, I had destroyed my marriage, my career, and possibly the empire Grayson had spent nearly a decade building. It should have made me panic. It should have made me collapse. But instead, it felt like putting down a suitcase I had been carrying for so long, I had forgotten what it felt like to stand up straight. Somewhere in this city, Grayson was probably getting ready for work. He would follow his usual routine, waking up earlier than most people, mixing a protein shake, scrolling through emails while his hair was still wet, organizing his workday into neat time blocks. He would sit in his familiar car, staring at the screen, thinking that the hardest thing he had to face today would just be a shareholder meeting or an annoyed investor. Maybe he was even smiling, thinking about his mistress and their new life. He could not imagine what was waiting for him at the company. At 8:47 a.m., I turned on my phone. The screen lit up like a digital storm. 73 missed calls, 46 messages, 12 voicemails. I opened the messages first. Most of them were from Grayson. The first one still kept the exact tone he always used when he wanted to control a crisis. "Where are you? This is not a joke. We need to talk rationally. You can't just disappear like this. I know you're angry, but this behavior is childish. Call me." Around 2 a.m., the tone changed completely. The words started getting shorter, more messy. "I'm sorry, I shouldn't have sprung this on you like that. Can we talk?" And then the line I knew was the exact moment he found out. "The board has received your email. What did you send?" That was the moment everything changed color. The messages after that were no longer about control, no longer about rationality. "You have to retract that email immediately. Lauren, you don't understand what you've just done. Call me now. This will destroy everything we built." Notice the pronoun. "We" only appeared when he was afraid. When things were smooth, it was always I. I opened the voicemails. I listened to the first one, sent at 11:47 p.m. last night. "Lauren, it's me. I know you're angry about the conversation today. I get it. I really do. It was a lot to process. But you can't just turn off your phone and disappear. We're adults. We're partners. Call me back." His voice was still calm, still managing the crisis the way a CEO handles a PR disaster. The voicemail at 3:15 a.m. was different. His voice broke. "Lauren." And there was a very short silence, like he was trying to hold on to his breath. "What did you send the board? Richard just called me. He said that you documented everything. Lauren, you're going to destroy the company. You're going to destroy everything we built. Please call me." I didn't listen to the rest. I deleted all of them. Then I saw the message from Richard Holloway, chairman of the board, the man who had put in the first big money into Apex Forge, when everyone else thought logistics was too boring a field to create a unicorn. "Lauren, we need to talk. Call me as soon as you get this message. This is very serious. We need to discuss your allegations before things go further. I'm not speaking as chairman of the board, but as someone who has known you for 8 years. We will handle this internally, as you suggested." The translation in my head appeared very clearly. "Don't talk to the press. Please let us clean this up quietly." I knew the board would never stay quiet. 7 people can't keep a secret, especially when that secret threatens a company valued in the billions of dollars. The entire conference room almost froze. Employees stopped pretending to type. Laptop screens were abandoned. Draft emails left half open. No one wanted to miss a single second. That atmosphere was more interesting than anything on Netflix. I spoke, standing up. "Piper, you are terminated. Effective immediately. The board has agreed. Security will escort you out." I tilted my head and looked around. "Take the forged documents and the bracelet you took from the company budget with you." And then Piper made the fatal mistake. She didn't leave. Instead, she straightened her back, stood to her full height, about 5'7", if you counted the expensive heels she clearly couldn't afford to buy, and shouted, "You're the one who has to go. This is my company too. Get out before I have you dragged out." The audacity, the complete madness of someone who was still on probation, who a few days ago was alphabetizing documents, now standing there, pointing and trying to kick out the woman who had built this company from zero. I smiled. This time the smile was wider. "All right," I said softly, "but let me tell you what the next 24 hours are going to look like." I didn't leave. Of course not. Nobody walks away from the company they built because someone with the business skills of a decorative plant tells them to. I sat back down, slowly, crossed my legs, watched her start to spiral. Grayson put his hand on Piper's arm then, and she shook him off in annoyance. Internal cracks this early? Worth watching. "Lauren, let's talk privately." Grayson tried to use that reasonable voice he had perfected throughout our marriage, the voice he used to explain why this month he had to work late with Piper for the 7th time before he boldly suggested open living. "No, thank you," I answered. "I prefer witnesses. It makes things harder to spin." Of course, honest is a relative term, given some of the people in this room. Myron Holt, our design lead, almost choked trying not to laugh. "Fine," Piper snapped, turning to the room like she was delivering an unrequested TED Talk. "Since Lauren is being uncooperative, let me clarify the new structure," she said, hands flailing. "I will be in charge of creative." "Based on what qualifications?" Myron cut in. "No more pretending to be professional." "Based on my Pinterest board," Piper shot back, "and my vision for building a modern brand. Something this company is seriously lacking. No offense, Lauren, but your work style is outdated. Clients want new, they want creative, they want results," I cut in. "And I've delivered all 3 for the past 8 years. While your biggest contribution was that client proposal that you stole from another company. The client sent me the original link. Very awkward." Piper's face drained fast. Her skin shifted colors in real time. "That was inspiration, not stealing," she argued. "Inspiration is taking an idea and transforming it," I said. "You downloaded the whole file, changed the font and the preparer's name. That's not inspiration, sweetheart. That's theft." Grayson cleared his throat, desperately trying to regain the last bit of control in a situation that was collapsing frame by frame. "Regardless of past misunderstandings," Grayson said, trying to keep his voice calm, "we need to focus on the future. Piper brings valuable skills to the company." "Name 3 skills," I cut in. Silence. A moment of silence so beautiful it was cruel. "She's good at social media," Grayson finally stammered. "Any 19-year-old with a phone and too much free time can do that," I said. "What else?" Silence. Again. This felt better than therapy, and definitely cheaper. "The point is," Piper jumped in, her voice clearly starting to shake, "changes are happening whether you like it or not." "I have proof you used company money for personal expenses," I reminded her, "and that's called fraud." Her hands started to shake, clearly, slightly, but I saw it. Grayson saw it too, by the way he stepped closer, a protective reflex rising for the woman who had helped him betray me. "You can't prove anything," Piper said, but it sounded more like a question than a statement. "Actually, I can prove everything," I replied. "Forensic accounting is very thorough. Every dinner, every trip, every amount the 2 of you withdrew, thinking I was busy running the back end of the company and wouldn't notice." I pulled out another stack of documents. "Let me give you a fun example. Remember that team building trip in Fredericksburg? The one I was told was for boosting employee morale?" Grayson's body went rigid. "It was actually just the 2 of you at a bed and breakfast," I said. "And you expensed couples yoga. The invoice literally says yoga for couples. You didn't even try to hide it." The whole room filled with an atmosphere where everyone pretended to be professional, but in reality was enjoying every second. "Grayson, do something!" Piper hissed, completely dropping the fake professional mask. This was the real Piper, the kind of person who thinks sleeping with the boss means she can skip the work part of a career. Grayson looked back and forth between me and her, clearly calculating which woman had the greater potential to destroy his life. "Maybe everyone should calm down," he suggested, so weak it sounded like an apology instead of a command. "Or you could explain how you bought a necklace for a client and then gave it to her," I shot back. "That never happened," he lied disastrously. Grayson had many talents. Terrible husband, even worse business partner, but lying convincingly was not on the list. His left eye twitched when he lied. Always did. "Your eye is twitching," I reminded him very helpfully. He lifted a hand to cover his eye as if that would save the situation. Piper started pacing across the room, her Louboutins clicking against the wooden floor that I had chosen and paid for. This is ridiculous. Grayson, we have paperwork. We have lawyers. You have nothing. I cut in, my voice flat. What you have is a file full of evidence of embezzlement, and about 4 hours before my real lawyers, the ones from the downtown firm that handle federal cases, file something that will make your life extremely complicated. You're bluffing, Piper repeated, but her voice had broken. Around 3 p.m. today, they'll be here. Finally, Grayson found his voice again. Lauren, please, we can fix this. You can watch the two of you face consequences for the first time in your lives. I finished. That's what you can do. Piper grabbed her designer handbag, another company expense, and stormed toward the door. This isn't over. She slammed the door shut. Grayson ran after her, throwing back a look at me that might have been pleading, or might have been a warning. I couldn't quite tell. I stayed in the conference room after everyone left, looking at the folders of evidence spread across the table like a deeply satisfying game of corporate solitaire. The phone vibrated. A text from Claire Barrett. Yes, the Barrett from the billboards all over downtown Seattle, with the line, "We don't settle." Process server confirmed 3 p.m. papers ready. About to be beautiful. This is what Piper and Grayson didn't know. I'd been suspicious for 6 months. Not because I had superpowers, but because Grayson suddenly started caring about his appearance. New cologne, gym workouts, even tight shirts to show off abs I hadn't seen in 8 years of marriage. That wasn't self-improvement. That was cheating. So I did what any self-respecting executive would do. I hired an accountant. Ethan Walsh, 63, bow tie, smelled like old books and justice. He found everything. Forged signatures, ghost expenses, hotel rooms charged to the company. Ethan pushed his glasses down his nose. Mrs. Martinez, I've been doing this for 37 years. This is the sloppiest embezzlement I've ever seen. They didn't even bother to hide it. How bad is it? They listed romantic vacations as client relationship development, used the company card to buy Victoria's Secret lingerie, and labeled it office supplies. Now in the conference room, I opened the banking app. Phase 2. Piper definitely didn't know. Only I had access to the real company accounts. Grayson had a company card, but transfer rights, treasury control, all of it was mine. Lesson from my father. Trust people, but keep your hand on the safe. 3 clicks, I froze every company card. Grayson's. 2 more clicks, their building access codes were disabled. 1 call to the IT contractor. Both of their company emails were locked. The phone rang. The investigator I hired. I just checked Piper's background. She doesn't have a college degree. Her resume says Wharton 2018. I called the registrar. 1 semester, failed 3 classes, dropped out. I leaned back in my chair and accepted the gift from the universe. So resume fraud to get the internship, employment contract void from the start, every dollar she was paid based on forgery. We could add that to the lawsuit. After hanging up, I sat there enjoying the beautiful chaos my almost ex-husband and his mistress had created for themselves. They built their relationship on lies, fraud, and shocking incompetence. Almost impressive. The phone vibrated. Grayson, we need to talk. I texted back, talk to my lawyer. I blocked Grayson's number. The feeling was like slamming shut a door I should have closed years ago. At 2:30 p.m., I drove back to my real home, the 4-bedroom Craftsman in Queen Anne, in my name from before the marriage, because I bought it with my own money. Grayson just moved in with me. Legally, it was always mine. I had checked this many times with my lawyer. I changed every lock, front door, back door, garage, even the gate code. In the afternoon, I went back to the company. The process server, a woman named Deline, with the energy of someone who truly loved her job, handed me copies of every document she had served. The blonde girl cried hysterically, she reported. The husband looked like he was about to throw up. She said, "This can't be legal." I told her, "That's for the court to decide, not a nail tech," because I found her at a nail salon, getting acrylics done with your husband's card. Declined. Perfect. I exhaled. Your husband tried another card. That one was declined too. Tried calling someone, but he was blocked. I spent the whole afternoon in the office, changing all passwords, backing up data to my personal server, calling each client and assuring them that despite internal turbulence, their projects were completely safe. By 6 p.m., my phone had 43 missed calls from the blocked number and 27 messages from strange numbers I didn't recognize. I ignored all of them. At 8:30 p.m., I poured myself a glass of wine. The expensive kind Grayson always said was not worth drinking on a normal day, and clinked the glass with myself inside the now fully secured house. At 12 a.m., the phone rang. Unknown number. Crying. Choking sobs. Breathing so desperate it would have been pathetic if it hadn't come from the person who had helped destroy my family. "Lauren, please, I'm begging you, stop this." Piper, voice in pieces. "The lawsuit. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know it was illegal. Grayson said everything was fine. Said you'd agreed to the relationship." "Agreed to step into my home? My company that he and I built together?" I cut in. "I'm sorry. I'll end it. I'll quit." "You were fired, remember? You can't quit when you're already unemployed. But the lawsuit, the criminal charges. Lauren, I can't go to jail. I can't survive." "You should have thought about that the moment you knew he had a family," I said, my voice cold enough to freeze the Puget Sound. "Before you tried to replace me and embezzle $580,000. The papers are filed. The evidence is in. Fake degree, embezzlement, fraud, all of it. You made your choice. Now live with the consequences." I hung up. The phone rang again immediately. I powered it off, finished my drink, went to bed, and slept better than I had in months. On Sunday afternoon, I was sitting in my car in front of Piper's apartment when I heard the beep, beep, beep of a truck reversing, the reversing alarm of a tow truck with a trailer behind it. I slowly rolled down my car window. A white truck, a big financial company logo printed loudly on the side, was slowly backing up to the curb. Behind it, the metal arm had already been lowered, its jaws open, waiting for its prey. The prey was Piper's white Audi. The Audi she loved to park diagonally in front of the company so everyone could see it, like a moving billboard. I'm successful, I'm special. Now it was sitting there, perfect, spotless, and completely helpless. A man in a reflective jacket stepped out, checked the license plate, compared the paperwork on his clipboard, and started hooking, tightening straps, lifting the front of the car. Everything was mechanical, cold, professional, not a single trace of emotion, just a process. My phone vibrated. Unknown number. I didn't answer. A text popped up right after. Piper. "My car just got towed. What did you do?" I looked at the words, as calm as looking at a weather forecast. This was the thing she didn't understand, that Audi had never been her car. It was a company car, in the company's name, paid in installments with company money, approved by my husband. I didn't need revenge. I just needed to dial the right number and tell the truth. The Audi was lifted with its front wheels off the road, hanging in the air, like a tiny symbol of this whole story. Everything they were standing on had never really belonged to them. The tow truck drove away. Neighbors watched, pretending not to be curious, but their eyes were glued to it. I rolled up the window, drove back to the company, opened my laptop. There was still a lot to clean up. About an hour later, an email from Ethan hit my inbox. Subject: Additional findings, housing expenses. I opened it. A spreadsheet appeared, neat, clean, cruel. I scrolled down, saw the address. A luxury apartment complex, glass walls, rooftop pool, less than 10 minutes drive from the company. I knew that place. That apartment didn't belong to some senior consultant at all. It was Grayson and Piper's private place, funded by the company account, under the name Business Expenses. Ethan added a note at the bottom of the email, very dry. Under regulations, if this housing cost was not approved by the board and not accompanied by a consulting contract, it is highly likely to be considered personal spending using company funds. potentially constituting embezzlement. I leaned back in my chair, imagining the scene across the city. Piper opening the fridge in that shiny apartment, discovering this month's rent transfer hadn't gone through. The landlord knocking on the door, gentle but firm. Card declined. You need to pay in cash or move out. They had used company money, my money, employees' money, to pay for the car, the apartment, the dinners, the clothes, the vacations, all the things they believed they deserved. Now those things were evaporating one by one, not because I was cruel, but because the gravity of the truth always pulls everything back to the ground. You have to see this. A message from my assistant with an Instagram link. I rarely open that app, but this time I did. Piper's account. Her latest story, posted 20 minutes ago. A selfie with a face streaked with tears. Mascara running down. Caption. When the people you once trusted destroy your life just out of jealousy, stay strong, everyone. Truth always wins. The comments were full of people comforting her. I screenshotted everything and sent it to Claire. Caption. Evidence for defamation case. Claire replied in 3 seconds. Beautiful. Keep sending. 1 month later, I stood in front of the county courthouse. Gray concrete building, wide steps, heavy glass doors, cold neon lights. Not beautiful, not warm. But it was where people redefined boundaries. Who owned what? Who was responsible for what? I wore a navy suit, the one for million-dollar pitches, and today was legal destruction day. Claire showed up with a thick briefcase, her steps sharp. She wore a black suit, hair tied neatly, eyes already sharp without much makeup. I looked at her file bag and knew. A part of my life was packed inside it, but this time on the right side. We walked into the small courtroom. Wooden benches, white walls, a wooden gavel on the desk. It felt like stepping onto a stage where everyone had to tell the truth, whether they wanted to or not. Grayson sat on the other side, wrinkled shirt, crooked tie, dark circles under his eyes like he hadn't slept. Next to him was a middle-aged man with a thin folder. Piper was not there. The judge walked in. Everyone stood and sat. Claire presented briefly, her voice slow, clear, not a wasted word. She laid each piece of evidence on the table like placing chess pieces, bank statements, internal emails. Grayson's lawyer tried to interrupt. Your Honor, my client believes these are just management errors, with no intent to deceive. Management errors don't pay your mistress's rent, Claire cut in, her voice still polite but razor cold. This is a prolonged, systematic pattern of behavior. Judge Elena Ramsey, in her 60s, eyes sharp enough to cut glass, took only 7 minutes to go through the evidence. The room went silent for a few seconds. Final ruling, we were divorced. My share of the assets was 60%. Grayson had to pay an additional $100,000 in emotional damages. He was banned from contacting me, employees, and company clients. All of his personal assets were frozen pending criminal investigation. Grayson looked at me, fear and disbelief mixed in his eyes, as if he had just discovered that the woman he always thought of as reasonable, compliant, had actually always been holding the keys to the entire system, and was now turning it in a direction he could no longer control. Outside, the city kept running, traffic still jammed, coffee still being sold. No one cared about a small trial in a small room, where a marriage and a company were being taken apart, thread by thread. But for me, it was the first step of something very simple, putting everything back where it belonged. Later I learned. Grayson moved from a luxury apartment to a cheap studio in Rainier Valley, an hour away by bus from downtown, with Piper. A few months later, both of them pleaded guilty in exchange for lighter sentences, probation, community service, and repayment of all the money they had withdrawn. And the damages they had caused. The company grew 55% after the incident. We signed 8 new clients, including 2 Fortune 500 corporations that specifically asked to work with the female CEO who doesn't tolerate nonsense. It turns out publicly exposing fraud is a very effective marketing strategy if you're the victim and not the one who committed it. I hired 3 new employees, all women, all truly competent, and all diplomas and background checks personally verified by me. Ethan, my forensic accountant, became a permanent advisor. His bow tie collection grew even bigger, and he caught 2 small irregularities in expenses before they could turn into real problems. The best investment I ever made. The divorce was finalized in March. Grayson, after compensation penalties, received nothing except his original 25% equity stake, which I immediately bought back at market price, far lower than what he thought he deserved, because as everyone knows, committing fraud massively lowers your negotiating power. He signed without arguing. I met him exactly once after everything had settled, in a coffee shop near the Capitol building. He was there with a girl who wasn't Piper, younger, clearly drawn in by the story he was telling. I watched him use the exact same gestures, the same smile he had used with me 10 years ago when we first met. Some people never learn anything, they just change their audience. He saw me, froze mid-sentence, then pretended not to see me. I lifted my coffee cup, pretended to toast him, and walked away. The look on his face was worth every dollar of legal fees I had paid. Someone once asked me, at a networking event, if I regretted how everything happened. If I wished I had handled it quietly, privately, without creating such a public spectacle. I thought for exactly 3 seconds. No, not at all, I answered. He humiliated me publicly, so he received consequences publicly. That isn't revenge, that is symmetry. The truth is, I spent 8 years being reasonable, being understanding, being the supportive wife, while Grayson wandered between ideas, careers, and identities, never finding his place. I built a company while he was finding himself. I was patient while he tried to decide who he wanted to be when he grew up. And the reward for all that patience, deception, humiliation, and a mistress who thought she could replace me. So, no, I don't regret that everything was dragged into the public light. I don't regret the frozen accounts, the seized Audi, or the courtroom that local legal blogs reported on. They made their choices. I simply documented them with absolute accuracy and a very good legal team. 1 year after the fateful meeting room, I stood on the rooftop of the 57th floor at sunset. Seattle was no longer gray. The last sunlight stained the glass faces of the buildings red, turning the whole city into a warm mirror reflecting myself. I no longer kept the old CEO desk, but I changed the chair. The new chair was teal, low-backed, so I could lean back without being afraid of anyone seeing me. Breathe. On the desk, there were only 3 things. A small cactus, the only species I've never managed to kill. A photo frame of the entire new team, all women, all grinning wide, and a new business card. I didn't change my last name. I just quietly changed my profile picture on every platform to a photo of me standing alone on this rooftop, white shirt flying in the wind, hands holding nothing, no phone, no laptop, no wedding ring, just wind and sunset. Now every morning, I walk slowly along the lake, letting stray dogs come close to sniff my hand, letting sunlight fall onto hair I haven't brushed yet. I no longer drink bitter black coffee to stay sharp. I drink a vanilla latte with an extra shot of caramel, sweet like when I was a student, like before anyone ever told me that successful women had to taste bitter. There are nights when I still wake up at 3 a.m., my heart pounding, as I remember that fateful day when he told me our marriage was broken. The way he looked at me like I was something outdated, something to be removed from his life. But I don't turn on the light anymore. I just pull back the curtains, let the moonlight spill onto the wooden floor, and whisper to myself, "It's over. Everything is over. Now it's just me with me, and I am enough." There are wounds that don't heal by being forgotten, but heal by you stopping calling them wounds. They become guiding light. They become the story you tell so others know. You can be deceived, you can be betrayed, you can be stripped of everything, but they can never take away your right to decide how you stand back up. I stood up. Not to prove anything to anyone, just to prove to myself that true freedom is when you no longer have to carry anyone else in every breath you take. And I promise those of you listening to this story, one morning, when sunlight falls onto your hair and you realize you're smiling for no reason, you will understand. Pain is not the ending. Pain is just the door you have to push open to step into the wide room called yourself. Thank you for staying with me until this very last second. If this story touched you, even a little, please press like to support, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next stories, and leave a comment, even just a dot, so I can know that somewhere out there, someone listened. See you again